Sex work stigma.
Why is this still a thing?
When you were younger, your parents gave you toy, doctor, and cooking sets. These were the professions they hoped you would have. But how would they react if you told them you wanted to be a sex worker? Oh, sherbet, wrong footage. That woman earns a respectable living. In 2017, 27.7% of South Africans are unemployed, and there is an estimated number of 153,000 sex workers in the country. This includes males, females, and transgender sex workers. So why stigmatize those who are trying to provide for themselves and their families just because you and society disagree with the type of work they're doing? Sex workers commonly experience high levels of sexual violence. Globally, sex workers have a 45 to 75% chance of experiencing sexual violence at some point in their careers, and a 32 to 55% chance of experiencing sexual violence in a given year. Through a survey conducted by the National Sex Worker Program in 2012 with 1,136 sex workers, it was said that 55% of sex workers picked up their clients from the street, 49% in a bar or shebeen, 27% in a brothel, 13% at truck stops, and 12% worked from home. The survey also found that 57% of sex workers experienced violence or abuse from their significant other. People often use the stigma of sex workers of being more exposed to sexual risk behaviors in order to emphasize the thought of it being a health and societal risk. Yet, in the survey, 95% of those that were surveyed state that they use protection during sex with their clients. When asked whether they use a condom with someone who is not their client, 81% said they did. Therefore, using risk behaviors as reason to criminalize and go against sex workers is not reason enough. Our society is so quick to turn a blind eye on the violation of sex workers because they are deemed less human. Why are people of various genders disregarded by society? Why do most public conversations focus on law and regulations aimed at controlling these stigmatized women rather than recognizing their agency? Did you know that most sex workers choose to be a part of this profession and do not feel forced into it? Therefore, why is sex stigma still a thing? I wonder.
Why do you think it could still be a thing?
I wonder, it's the 21st century.
I mean, you'd expect us to be used to this kind of thing. We live in a supposedly progressive society.
I just don't get why it's still a thing.
I know, right? Sex is literally everywhere.
It's fed to us by the media 24/7.
We see it all the time. I just don't see why it's still a thing.
Or perhaps it's because idiots like Chad Harris exist. This arsehole thought it would be acceptable to go onto a public platform and pose the question, if somebody rapes a prostitute, is it considered rape or shoplifting? When he was confronted about the manner in which he was dehumanizing sex workers, he dug his grave deeper by saying, I'll tell you what's dehumanizing, their jobs. The stigma is developed from the games we play, the movies we watch, and the memes and dead hooker jokes that we enjoy and laugh at. We live in a society where a woman's sexual expression is both celebrated and shamed, where sex is labeled as deviant behavior in some circumstances and normalized in others. A Parisian public official described sex workers as the most dangerous people in society. Really, dude? Are these really society's most feared people? Oops, wrong Manson. We're looking for Charles Manson. These are mothers, children, siblings, and even grandparents that we're talking about. This is not surprising, since sex workers have historically symbolized sin in Judeo-Christian religious traditions. How can you overcome a stigma that has been entrenched in society since the beginning of time? In the Old Testament, in the book of Revelations, prostitution was tolerated because it helped prevent the greater evils of rape, sodomy, and masturbation. If we give sex workers basic human rights and a voice of their own, the common abuse of sex workers will be eradicated for the most part. Prostitution was, after all, acceptable until the outbreak of plague and stigma was formed. The South African Constitution states that every human being has a right to dignity and to choose their own occupation, yet the people who abuse and violate sex workers are those associated and involved with the law, such as law enforcement and the health sector. The following lawyer, however, speaks on behalf of sex workers regarding the notion of sexual liberation.
Right, human nature. People have an instinctive drive to sex. If you don't have a safe, healthy outlet within your interpersonal relationship, many people are going to seek it out in a commercial market.
In essence, if you expel prostitution from society, you will unsettle everything on account of lust. Ultimately, this brings us back to the question, sex work stigma. Why is this still a thing?